Those who think we're powerless to do anything about this greenhouse effect are forgetting about the White House effect. And as president, I intend to do something about it.
I'm back, and I'm here with Bonni Cohen, who's one of the directors of the White House Effect. That we've seen it premiered. Well, it did it world premiere or here, or
it had its European premiere.
It's European premiere here,
yeah,
at IDFA, and we got to see it in the gorgeous iCinema, and it really took me back to to growing up in watching the news around the greenhouse effect. But tell me, Bonni, why you wanted to make this film, an archive-based film about climate change.
Yeah. Well, so the directing team on this film is myself, John Shenk, and Pedro. We came back for a reunion tour. We made The Island President together. And I produced that, John directed, and Pedro edited. And the nature of that film called for those roles to break out that way. Okay. This film, it's an all-archival film. It's heavily in the hands of the editor. And we decided to sort of work as a cohort of directors because the task was just kind of insurmountable at first. We've made, this is our third climate film. John and I, as I said, we made The Island President, and that was followed in 2017 by an inconvenient sequel with Al Gore. And we care very deeply about all the issues that face us around the climate crisis, and we talked a lot together about what kind of film we could spend our time making that could really move the needle. And it felt to us that, the climate hero model, which was the model for our previous two climate films, has its place, and it gives people hope, and it shows what the individual can do and how brave you can be in coming forward and standing up for your country or the world, and, moving the needle that way, and in educating the rest of the world from a platform, almost like the Lorax,
Yeah.
In this case, we thought that diving back into history in an archival context, we called it archival vérité, sinking you into an immersive experience of this particular period of time. And I can tell you why we chose that particular period, could have sort of an irrefutable argument to it. There are no experts intervening. We're not chasing something contemporary, but in fact, just looking at this historical period of time where you can have the experience of where you were at that moment and see a reflection of yourself back, in this case as an American, to sort of, see what role you played in the context of everything that was going on between 1988 and 1992, which was a very specific moment for the climate.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I was growing up, like probably first when I was starting to pay attention to what politics was right at that time, but I didn't know Al Gore in that role, knew him more as vice president and in The Inconvenient Truth, which I remember seeing. You did say, but why is that period of time so important? Why? I found it fascinating, but why did you find that was such an important part to focus most of your film on?
Yeah, we had actually read an article by a journalist named Nathaniel Rich. He had written a piece called Losing Earth for the New York Times Magazine, which he then subsequently turned into a book. And it focuses on that exact period, 1988 to 1992, because as you see in the film, there are a number of things that kind of coalesce in that 4-year time frame. There was a terrible drought in the country, in the United States, in 1988. All the climate science was starting to become really obvious, and there were congressional hearings at that time around the significance of the greenhouse effect and what scientists had discovered. So the science was in. And third, there was a moment in politics where both candidates in the 1988 presidential race, George Bush and Michael Dukakis, Republican and Democrat, both ran as a pro-environmental candidate. So it was a fascinating time to see this opportunity for the American people, where a window was open for a short period, and we could have done the right thing. And the drama of the film is that we had that opportunity and we didn't do right by the climate.
I think also an interesting time because, and I don't know if it was slightly before or after, but I saw like Crossfire, and so you're starting to see this kind of C-SPAN and 24/7 television that is purposely trying to get you to have a polarized one view or the other, or just even Rush Limbaugh. So it's like, it seems like it's coming. Like you did have a lot of focus on the news. And
Well, we first have a focus on the news disseminating information.
yeah,
And that starts to shift and change as the climate crisis becomes a political, sort of claims a political identity.
yeah,
And then disinformation starts to seep in, and radio broadcasters and television broadcasters start to take that on. It starts to become this thing that everybody agreed about, becomes a fight and a struggle. And we were really interested in that. When was the moment when the disinformation sort of seeped into this, and how was it co-opted by the media? And then how did it then transmit into the living rooms of the American public?
yeah. And it did feel like the beginning of that period of time when that happened. It was amazing and interesting to see. I'm obsessed with archive. Both Yulia and I've made archive films together. It's a great deal of work to find that much material, though, and to find that much quality material, and to keep that, which keeps you quite. And it's also a lot of money, like to license that. So tell me a little bit about your process of the archive research that you did.
So we worked with these terrific archival producers, Gideon Kennedy and Rich Remsburg. We'd worked with them in the past on other films in a much smaller capacity. This was, they became producers on the film because they were going to be hunting for very specific things that we were looking for. We ended up amassing about 15,000 video clips across a multitude of sources that were in these different buckets. There was news media, there was politics, there were the presidential libraries, there were, private collections. Like one of our producers in New York found a guy who used to be a publicist for Exxon, and he had all these tapes in his, garage that he hadn't looked at since the 80s. So it was this sort of full court press on behalf of, we had a team of about 8 people that had fanned out to find all this specific material. It took almost 3 years to find it all.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's expensive. We did a combination of licensing materials, but also we had a very solid fair use attorney working with us.
Okay.
And we have a very solid fair use argument for the film.
Yeah.
Not everything, of course, fits into that for all the reasons that, I could give a dissertation on fair use, but you have to be able to make a solid claim in order to use the footage for free. I would say maybe half the footage in the film, a third to a half of the footage in the film was able to be fair used, but that we had a very high, from the beginning, a very high archival licensing budget.
Yeah.
And we raised those funds from a lot of private sources that, people who were incredibly interested in the environment.
Yeah. It's amazing to see the oil company and Exxon's sort of role in the way that things eventually become part of the narrative of the scientists who disagreed with the majority. Is there any sort of complication with that in terms of having to deal with the fallback or something, or did you how do you get access to that kind of information? Like you said, you had this former publicist, but getting the rights to show some of that.
Well, I mean, we found those Exxon documents and there have been journalists. We stood on the shoulders of journalists who did a lot of this work and have released pieces. In some cases, front lines on PBS. We went to the sources, the journalistic sources, who had uncovered some of the documents from that time that proved that Exxon was doing the research into the effects of carbon in the atmosphere very, very early on. Mm-hmm. And then we went about trying to find the material to substantiate that. The sort of internal Exxon press conferences. If they, for example, having a press conference for their shareholders, or doing press around, some of these findings, we found all of that, a lot of it in this garage of this publicist, but also other places, C-SPAN, CNN, etc. And when you're editing this material, I say that it's irrefutable. It is. It's like an archival record, but we were trying to make particular arguments, and so we looked for specific things to make that argument.
What is your, I mean, for me, maybe again, because I love archive film and I love sort of watching the nostalgia of, of that period of time. It really did help me learn a lot more about the history of American politics connected with the climate crisis. And I learned a ton. What is your ambition for the kind of audience that you want to, and what do you want that audience to get out of this film?
I mean, I think that what's unique about this film, and it's something that's very important to us as the filmmakers, there have been a lot of films that point fingers at politicians and the fossil fuel industry and the sort of complexity of the culpability around the climate crisis. We really wanted to obviously own that, but also our deep hope is that audiences see themselves in the American public.
Yeah.
And that's why there's so much opportunity to see, like man on the street interviews and people in their living rooms absorbing information. We basically use the American public as one of the main characters of the film. And the takeaway should be, our hope is that the takeaway is, I see myself in these people. Oh my God, I lived through that period of time. I don't remember these three things coming together: the climate, the greenhouse effect, the campaign, the drought. And once we put all of those things together and you remember being a person, an American citizen in that time period, you start to feel something really personal.
Yeah.
And, we're going to continue to live through these periods. We're living in one right now, which is arguably a lot worse. And we're facing a new president, a new old president whose, feelings about the environment, as everyone well knows, it's not at the top of his list of priorities to keep the greenhouse effect in check. So, our hope is that Americans in particular, but folks around the world, see how important elections are. Your vote matters. What we stand for matters, and it has these direct results in terms of the Keeling curve going up and up and up. And that relationship, that's the goal of this film, is to be able to see yourself in that experience and also see the relationship between your vote and the carbon in the atmosphere just going up.
Yeah. I mean, this is a much maybe bigger than just this film, but I mean, I felt quite culpable, and also feel a little bit of despair at the end because it was so long ago, and the footage looks quite old, and I was 8 or whatever. But do we have what positives can we take from this, and what can we learn from this, and how can we move forward by looking at our history from that period of time?
Yeah, I mean, you're having the desired effect. I mean, I think as artists, we want you to feel that rage and that despair, because that creates activism.
Yeah.
There are different routes to activism. Hope also can create activism. But in the case of this film, it's the rage, and we are very specific about that and how the film ends. But as I say, votes matter, but also the real heroes of this film, I hope you saw, are the scientists, and the way that they keep going and keep going and keep discovering and keep trying new things. There's a sequence at the end of the film where you see, scientists all over the world, up at the North Pole and down in Antarctica, taking measurements and studying glaciers and doing the work to really make sure that we as a human civilization understand exactly what's going on, and how we can continue to seize control and sort of wrest control back from what we've lost. It's inarguable we've lost some things, but there is still a ton of work that can be done to save what we have. That's still the truth.
Taking this archive vérité, do you have new interests in continuing to focus in on archive and having archive tell this story or other stories, other political stories?
I mean, I think it's a really interesting form. I think that this new age that we're unfortunately living in of sort of confusion about truth and disinformation, we're turning back to history and to archive for these irrefutable claims and these irrefutable arguments. So yes, I think there's really a place for it. It's hard, we were talking yesterday, when something happens in the world and you go to try and find the news about it these days, there are all these different tracks, political tracks that, sort of represent the same event. And as Stephen Schneider says in the film, if you confuse the public about what the truth is, they are not going to know what to do or how to vote.
Yeah.
And so archival truth is really significant right now, and investigative journalism is more important than ever. I think those two forms in the world we're living in right now are excruciatingly important for finding the truth, particularly about political stories where bifurcation happens the most.
Yeah. And I'd also say, and so maybe final question, because we're at a documentary film festival, why and how does documentary film play a role in this as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole conversation to have about documentary versus journalism.
Yeah.
Because there are so many similarities, but there are also very specific differences. Where, I think the White House effect is kind of both. It is a piece of journalism, but it's journalism plus, because we do have a point of view in the film. We are inarguably tracking for 90 minutes towards a conclusion that we believe in as filmmakers, and that's what we were going for. So artists have something to say. It's, those that have the benefit of being at a documentary festival and hearing and seeing all of these different perspectives, I think are best suited to have a stance on particular issues. I think there's so much of people sitting alone in their living rooms, reading their own news feed, which is basically they're being fed the same information that they've, metriced for.
Yeah.
And so coming out in the world and being at a place like this and having the opportunity to experience these stories from particular perspectives, as distinct from journalism, is incredibly important in this time. And coming together, I did a Q&A last night for this film, and it was 12:30 a.m. and there were, 25 political science students.
Oh, wow.
Just asking question after question. And it was beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's the goal.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, and your other film, you've has just come out as well.
In Waves and War.
Yeah. Can you tell me about that as well?
It's another comedy by Actual Films. In Waves and War, I co-directed with John Shenk also. And it's a film. It tells the story of 3 special operatives, Navy SEALs, U.S. Navy SEALs, who come back from the 20-year war in Afghanistan and Iraq, really broken men. Obviously PTSD, but also traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
And they learn, their wives actually, who are so desperate because the suicidality is very high in that community. They can't function. They can't hold down jobs. They can't remember anything. They learn about this sort of apex psychedelic drug that is not legal in the U.S., but is actually legal in Mexico. And the film is about the journey that these 3 guys take. They're friends, and they go down and they go on this journey. And it's about what they discover about their own childhood trauma and what it was like for them to become Navy SEALs. And so it's really about this community that is in our country, the tip of the spear in the military, and then they kind of become the tip of the spear to save themselves in their own community. So yeah.
We just want to ask about your personal journey from the start and to now, and what has really changed for you having made this film?
Changed for me as a person, or changed for me in terms of the climate and the okay. Yeah, I have 2 kids. John and I are actually a married couple, and we have 2 kids that are in their 20s. And we have always been very interested in the environment and environmental causes, but since becoming parents, which is now 20 years plus, it's become really important to us, and we feel like we have something to say. And this film felt like an opportunity to really, for our kids and the people their age, to look at this period of history where we grew up, and where we could have done something, because they're facing a moment right now which is it's existential. It's a time when they can do something, and so we're for me, it became an opportunity to say, I lived through this period in the 80s and 90s, and I was really aware politically, and I didn't know how bad this was, and I didn't know what this opportunity was. So that was sort of the intention, and it really, it became exaggerated after the film came out, and we are now seeing ourselves reflected back in the young audiences that are watching, and that's been very moving for us.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I really love the film.
Thank you so much.